Antarctica, the coldest, highest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth, classified as a desert and a harsh place to survive, much less live and thrive. Yet there are stories of exactly that happening. One of those stories is about two huskies, Taro and Jiro, who were left behind on the continent but survived and eventually became symbols of perseverance. For centuries, there were speculations about some vast undiscovered land to the south of the world. Long before anyone ever laid eyes on this mysterious land, cartographers and philosophers were convinced that it existed. One such philosopher was Aristotle, who in the 4th century BC came up with the theory that the continents of the northern hemisphere needed a counterweight, which in his mind meant that an unknown landmass in the southern hemisphere had to exist to balance out the continents of the northern hemisphere. This is an idea that was later echoed by later philosophers and astronomers such as Claudius Ptolemy and philosopher Marcus Tullius Cicero. The name Antarctic, which means the opposite of the Arctic, was coined by 2nd century Greek geographer Marinus of Tyre. Over time, this mysterious land would come to be known as Terra Australis, Latin for southern land, or Terra Australis Incognita, which is the unknown land of the south. As no one had yet seen it, this land was not based on any documented knowledge of a continent that existed, but it still appeared on maps between the 15th and 18th centuries. They were so sure that this land existed, even though no one had ever seen it. But as we know, time would prove the ancients right. The first sighting of the continent is often attributed to Captain James Cook when his ships HMS Resolution and HMS Adventure crossed the Antarctic Circle 3 times in 1773 and 1774. Cook had been forced to retreat due to ice fields, but he would return home stating that he believed that the existence of this fabled continent in the south was more than probable. This account from Cook would lay the groundwork for further exploration of the elusive continent. The first recorded landing of an island near Antarctica occurred in 1819 when British Captain William Smith discovered the South Shetland Islands. The following year, Antarctica would be sighted by 3 different expeditions: Russian explorers Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev, as well as British naval officer Edward Bransfield and American sealer Nathaniel Palmer. But despite all of them sighting the continent, none of them set foot on it. It's actually important to remember too that there is a distinction between sighting an Antarctic island, landing on an island near Antarctica, and actually setting foot on the continent itself. The first claimed landing of the continent was by British-American sealing captain John Davis in the ship Cecilia. They reportedly landed at Hughes Bay in Antarctic Peninsula on the 7th of February 1821. The reason I say that this is a first claimed landing is because this is disputed by some historians, as there is actually no evidence that he landed on the continent instead of an offshore island like Captain Smith had done years earlier. The first confirmed landing in Antarctica came on January 24th, 1895, when an expedition led by Hendrik Johan Bull landed at Cape Adar. Over the years, there would be more and more expeditions to the continent, which even culminated in an era known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, which began at the end of the 19th century and ended after the First World War. Exploration of the Antarctic has continued to this day, which brings us to January 1957. The Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition Program, JARE, began in 1957. They would establish Choa Station on East Ongle Island in January that same year. After establishing this outpost, a team of 11 researchers was sent. This team was supported by 19 huskies as a sled team. The plan originally was that they would remain at the base for a year and would be replaced by another team in February 1958. This expedition went well for the most part. 3 of the huskies would unfortunately die, but one of the female dogs would give birth to a litter of 8 puppies. The crew that was supposed to replace the team at the base was traveling on a ship called Soya, which arrived near Antarctica in December 1957. Due to severe weather conditions, the ship became trapped in the ice and it would take 46 days for them to break free. They would meet up with the United States Coast Guard icebreaker called Burton Island. With the help of this icebreaker, the ship would re-enter the dense pack ice on the 8th of February 1958. On the 11th of February, 6 helicopter trips would take the 11 members of the first team along with a cat and 2 canaries back to the ship. The day after, 3 members of the second team arrived at the base and began preparing for the arrival of the rest of the team. But the weather was steadily growing worse. On the 14th, serious concerns had arose regarding the ship escaping the ice, and they were so concerned about getting stuck that the captain of the Soya made the decision to leave the area, head out to open sea and return to base once the weather improved. So he contacted the 3 men who had arrived at the base to return to the ship. Reportedly, the men would refuse. They argued that they had food at the base and that there were dogs left behind on the base. They argued that if the plan was for the ship to return at some later date, then they wanted to remain on base and continue preparing for the expedition once they arrived. They argued with the captain and said that with the food and the dogs, the 3 of them would be able to survive the winter if the ship was unable to re-enter. The captain did not like this argument and did not change his mind whatsoever. He then issued an ultimatum and ordered the men to return to the ship. He told them that the severe weather only gave them 1 more chance for air transport. If they didn't get on that helicopter, they would be left and a report would be filed. He also allegedly gave the order that the dogs should remain chained at all times to avoid them becoming feral or resorting to cannibalism. The 3 men from the second team would relent. Before they left, they distributed roughly 2 months' worth of food for the remaining 15 dogs. The remaining dogs were then left behind, still chained at the base. The plan was to return to them as soon as they possibly could. On the 18th of February, they did try re-entering the dense pack ice in the hopes of finding somewhere to deploy the helicopter to either get the dogs or drop off the men at the base. This was unsuccessful. The next day, on the 19th, a blizzard would tear through the area with winds so strong that it tore off the searchlight and the telephone antenna on the ship. On the 24th, it was decided by headquarters that the second team would not be deployed. That also meant that the plan of getting the dogs out of there was postponed, meaning that by now, the survival of the dogs was seen as impossible. After some considering, the crew reached a point where they felt that perhaps the best thing for them to do was to euthanize the dogs. But with no way for the helicopter to take off, this plan also had to be abandoned. So the dogs were abandoned, left chained up at the base to starve to death. The team would return to Japan, where they faced heavy criticism for abandoning the dogs. This would be explained roughly as I did above, that there was no way for them to rescue the dogs. The weather simply did not allow it, and it was too great a risk. On January 14th, 1959, a third expedition would return to the base to resume the work that was abandoned the previous year. During the flight to the base, the pilot had noticed that there seemed to be 2 dogs roaming near the base. They then decided to bring in a man named Kitamura, who had been the dog handler for the first team. As soon as the men touched down on the ground, the dogs remained nearby, but they seemed very wary of these new arrivals. Kitamura knew the dogs pretty well, and he took some time to observe them, trying to figure out who they might be. Based on the white tips of his paws, he would determine that one of the dogs was Jiro. He tested this theory by calling out the dog's name, and the dog would respond to it. He then thought he knew who the other dog might be, so he called his name as well. The dog would also respond and confirm his theory. The dogs in question were brothers, Taro and Jiro. When they were abandoned at the base the year previous, they were 3 years old, the youngest of the pack. And to the shock of the men who now arrived at the base again, these 2 dogs had survived months of extreme conditions in the Antarctic. 7 of the 15 dogs had all died, still chained at the base. 8 of the dogs, including Taro and Jiro, had gotten free of the chains and left the base. 5 of those 8 would never be found, but one of them was found in the melted snow near the base. This dog was believed to be a dog named Ricky due to its gray, short-haired fur. Ricky was actually the oldest of the dogs at 7 years old. Kitamura had observed him being very caring towards Taro and Jiro, so much so that he would offer his food to the younger brothers. This would lead Kitamura to speculate that Ricky's presence may have been crucial to Taro and Jiro's survival, that the elder dog would take on a leadership role once the dogs had freed themselves from the chains. After finding the 2 dogs alive, the question immediately became, how did they survive? There were no signs that they had eaten the food left for the dogs at the base, and the bodies of the other dogs were also left alone, with no signs of cannibalism. The team would witness the dogs attacking seals and penguins together and assume that that's how they survived. They also realized during this third expedition that the 2 brothers were very good at slipping out of their collars. But the more they spent time with the dogs and the more they observed them, the more they doubted that they would hunt seals and penguins. While they saw them attack penguins, they rarely ate them. As for the seals, the dogs seemed to prefer seal feces, but attacking the seals themselves came with the risk of falling into the ocean, which the dogs seemed hesitant to do. So, while the dogs may have tried to hunt the occasional seal, the team doubted that this was the main source of food for the dogs. Instead, Kitamura would theorize that Taro and Jiro most likely survived from eating human provisions left at depots by the first expedition during their dog sled survey trips and whale carcasses that were discovered during survey trips. The survival of the 2 dogs became a sensation. It made the national news and turned the dogs into national heroes in Japan, so much so that their breed became the most popular dog breed in the country, being in high demand until the 1990s. Their story would also be immortalized in songs and movies, such as the 1983 Japanese film Antarctica and the 2006 American film 8 Below. As for the good boys themselves, Taro was relocated to his hometown of Sapporo and would live the remainder of his life at Hokkaido University. He passed away of old age in 1970 and was placed on display in the Museum of National Treasures at the Botanical Garden of Hokkaido University. Jiro would remain in Antarctica and continued working as a sled dog until his passing due to illness in 1960. After his death, his body was brought back to Japan, where it would be stuffed and moved to the National Science Museum of Japan, where he would be in good company, because this is the same museum where the legendary Hachiko is displayed. If you're not familiar with that story, here's the short version. Hachiko was an Akita who would meet his owner at the train station every single day after his commute home. One day, his owner suffered an aneurysm while at work, which led to him passing away. That same afternoon, Hachiko went to the station as usual to wait for him, but his owner never came back. Hachiko would still return to the station and wait for him every day for the next 10 years. His story would become international news and led to the Akita becoming a very popular dog breed, both in Japan and overseas. As for the sled dogs, monuments dedicated to them would be constructed all over Japan, both to remember the pack that was left behind, but also to honor the perseverance and bravery of Taro and Jiro. One of the best known monuments is at the foot of the Tokyo Tower by the Japan Animal Welfare Association. When I first started researching it, I kept getting stuck on the fact that they left the dogs chained up. I can understand why they may not have been able to get the dogs out at first. Antarctica is unforgiving, and there may not have been any good options at that point. But the more I read about it, I kept thinking how callous it was to leave the dogs chained up like that. But then I started wondering if this story was region locked. Maybe there's information that simply had been lost in translation. So I started looking into the Japanese sources, specifically the Japanese wiki. There are a lot of details that are not mentioned when this story gets retold in English, such as the detail that they deployed 3 members of the second team to the base, and that those 3 members argued for remaining on the base over the winter with the dogs, and that they actually thought of euthanizing the dogs because that would be the more humane thing to do instead of just leaving them. Those details are often lost, and that's common for stories where most of the sources are in languages other than English. A lot of details will be missed or maybe even ignored. For all I know, I may be guilty of that too. Even with various resources these days, the translations may not always be perfect, so some stuff might be lost. But I did my best to try to tell as fair a story as I could. Regardless of the details of what the humans were doing, the dogs were left behind at the base. 7 of them would die still chained, while 8 of them would break free and make an attempt at survival. In the end, only 2 would remain, the 2 youngest of the pack. So while my brain went somewhere altogether different when I heard Husky, Antarctica, this story is the story of 2 brave dogs who faced adversity in one of the most unforgiving places in the world and survived. 2 very good boys who became symbols of endurance. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care.